Anybody that has been on the Navajo reservation has either probably heard of some creepy things or have experienced pretty creepy things, namely skinwalkers. I have only seen one, and here is my story. I come from a small town in northern Arizona that's sandwiched between the Paiute Reservation to the north and America's largest Navajo reservation to the south. My high school, being so small, always had to travel south about 5 to 10 hours one way to play another high school in any sport. This means that we traveled a lot on the Navajo reservation, and we also usually stayed at hotels when we would head out to play and come home in the morning. But this trip was a little bit different. I remember the basketball coach saying that the school didn't have enough money to put up the teams in a hotel that trip, so we were going to be on the road for a total of about 12 hours. I was the only male senior to play basketball that season. We had just got done playing our game and headed home on our bus, Big Blue. We were headed out, and it wasn't long, about 2 hours of driving, before we had entered the reservation. By this time, everyone was asleep, with it being about 2 in the morning. When we had crossed the reservation's border, I noticed the bus driver had sped up and was now going about 85 miles an hour. I thought this was a little weird because he never exceeded the speed limit, at least not in my high school career. For some reason, I couldn't fall asleep like the rest of my teammates, and I just sat at the back of the bus, staring out across the desolate desert landscape that was lit up by the full moon. As I looked out, I could see a figure running towards the bus at an angle of pursuit and keeping up with the bus at 85 miles an hour. As the figure got closer, I saw that it was a humanoid form. As a matter of fact, it looked exactly like a human, only that the face was painted half black and half white, with glowing eyes. Glowing eyes like a rabbit's eyes reflecting light from a spotlight. I immediately thought, holy crap, it's a skinwalker. The skinwalker ran up to the edge of the road and just kept up pace with the bus, hurtling sagebrush and rocks while staring at me. After I made eye contact with the thing, I could not look away. It was as if something was holding my head and eyes in place. The skinwalker just smiled at me, this inhuman smile that went ear to ear, showing crooked yellow pointed teeth. I felt like I was going to throw up, and I was panicking through the whole ordeal. The skinwalker started to crumple down onto all fours, still keeping up with the bus. I could see his bones crack and reform. Hair started appearing all over the skinwalker's body, and in about 3 seconds was now a coyote, and it ran off back into the desert, out of view. As soon as it was gone, I ran to the onboard bathroom and puked a mixture of food and blood. I didn't want to tell anyone for fear that they would think I was crazy. I confided in my Navajo friend. She told me I needed to see the chief, who also happened to be a friend of mine, and get a blessing. I saw him the next school day in the parking lot. He just came up to me and mumbled something in Navajo while waving a feathered scepter-like thing, turned around, got in his truck, and drove away. To this day, I haven't seen another skinwalker. It might be due to the fact I moved away from that town and reservation, and if I do have to go south, I go way around. This was in a small town in Oklahoma with a decently sized native population. This guy was Mexican. He was the nicest dude you would ever want to meet, and he was about 35 at the time. He had a family, and he was an honest, good-natured man that I could never see making up something for no reason. It was late one night, and we were talking about an abandoned building at the campus of a small community college that used to be housing. Supposedly it was haunted. A friend and I wanted to sneak in and check it out. He advised us not to and mentioned that he once lived in an apartment on campus there, and some strange stuff happened. Stuff like hearing footsteps upstairs in a different apartment and a fridge opening and closing. Then someone mentioned the upstairs was empty. He figured someone was squatting there, so at 1 o'clock in the morning, he heard it and grabbed a bat. There was a staircase that led up there, so no way someone could have gotten out by the time he started up. He opened the door, and nothing but an old, non-working fridge on the opposite end. He didn't stay long after his doors began to open and shut on their own, but he claimed that wasn't nearly as freaky as the last time he was in Mexico. He was driving back to the US after visiting family. His wife was in the passenger seat asleep. He wasn't too far from the border, so he decided to keep driving a little after midnight instead of stopping somewhere for the night. It was sort of a desert type road. He said he was going about 65 miles per hour when he noticed something in his peripheral vision out in the darkness of the passenger window. Something was out there, and it was keeping up with him. Obviously this shook him up. He hit the gas. 75 miles an hour, 75, 80, 85. It was still keeping up. At this point it was almost too absurd that he thought it was just his tiredness playing tricks on his eyes, until it changed directions. Instead of moving parallel with this car, it began to angle back toward the car. As it got closer, more light hit it, and he said in no uncertain terms, it looked like a human. It was still slightly shadowed from the darkness, but he was certain it was a humanoid form. He accelerated to 90 miles per hour, and a few seconds later, it angled back into the darkness and was gone. As he finished the story, I could tell his eyes were welled up and his hands were trembling, and this was a tough, no BS dude. It physically struck him to the core just to recall it. Not surprisingly, he said he is never going back to Mexico. I'm a Diné Navajo boy, and I have heard a lot of stories growing up on the reservation. While I've never seen anything myself, which I am grateful for, I have benefited by being around the people who have. There is a different kind of evil that exists in the quiet high deserts and deep sandstone canyons of Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and even Colorado in the southern Utes area. I can only describe it as an ancient evil. Now, there are helpful ceremonies, rituals, and traditions that are still practiced to this day. Hell, even a local hospital has an on-duty medicine man, but it seems to be a double-edged sword. What I mean is there's also black magic, which most Diné will not even acknowledge or speak of. We are very superstitious and are very heavy with taboos. You will find this with most First Nation people, from Alaska to Argentina. It's just something you don't do in fear that it will get the attention of unwanted spirits or harmful beings. Skinwalkers are just a few stories that kept me up at night with the covers over my head. Here's a quick one for you guys. A Navajo tribal police officer was driving west on what used to be officially named Highway 666. It was lightly snowing, maybe a quarter inch, which is a lot of snow for home, and he sees an old woman walking on the side of the road. How she got there or where she was going was not apparent because she was so far out in the middle of nowhere. He didn't see her right away, but as he passes, he noticed that she is dressed in traditional clothing, a shawl, dress, moccasins, and her hair in the traditional bun. Not too odd, many elders still choose to dress traditionally, but why was she out in such cold weather this late at night? Hitchhiking maybe? He passed her too quickly and now has to turn around. And as he makes a U-turn, he notices she is nowhere to be seen. This is fairly flat terrain and he for sure saw an old woman walking. He pulls the squad car over and steps out with his flashlight. Confused, he manages to find the woman's footprints in the shallow snow. He follows the footprints until they suddenly turn into what looks like dog footprints, leading away from the road in a hurry. He immediately jumps back into the squad car and meets up with another officer near his patrol. He is a little shaken up but asks the other officer if he has ever seen anything like that. The officer tells him that he has. He also explains that sometimes it's an old woman, sometimes a very beautiful young girl, but always on that road and always in the snow, waiting for the right good Samaritan to let her into their car. I still get nervous driving those wide open spaces at night. I keep my eyes strictly on the road and turn my music up high. I rarely pick up hitchhikers, but I never pick them up at night.